Well, good morning, everybody. I hope that you've been um, having a good quarantine, as best of a quarantine or self-imposed quarantine as you can. That these videos have been encouraging you and helping you to understand who God is. We're going to take a break over the weekend, so Friday we will not have anything. I mean, not Friday, but Saturday we won't have anything going on as far as videos go. I am thinking sometime this weekend we'll do a live session so that you guys can ask some questions, and I'll post the details of when we'll do that here in a little bit. So today's theme is all about spirit. So when you hear the word spirit, what is it that you think? Well, it might be something along the lines of uh, inner motivation, right? I have a lot of spirit to perform such and such a task. So like the football team had a lot of spirit to come from behind and to win. Or maybe it's school spirit. I remember, the school, the whole, idea of trying to support your teams and just having school pride and having that school enthusiasm and spirit. Or it might be something like ghost. When you hear the word spirit, you might think something like ghost. But in John 4:24, Jesus makes this comment to the woman at the well in Samaria, and he says that God is spirit and that he must be worshiped in spirit and in truth. That's John 4:24. So, what is it that Jesus means when he says that God is spirit? What does it mean when he's making that claim about God's being? He's making a statement about what God is like. What is his essence like, or a part of his ontological nature, to use a big word. Ontological just simply means about his being. What does it mean to be God? And Jesus makes a claim that God is spirit. So a few things that this means. We're gonna just talk about three of them. There's probably more, but we're just gonna focus on three of them for today. The first one is this: that God is non-physical. For us, this is kind of a strange idea when we begin to think about it, because we're surrounded by physical things: animals, trees, snow, our houses, ourselves, other people. Everything is physical. Like on the earth that we and live in and inhabit, we are locked in space and time. We are physical beings with physical limitations that come with being physical beings. But God is spirit. And so he does not face the same restrictions being a non physical being. Time and space don't affect him the same way that it affects us. So, for instance, God cannot grow older or younger. He simply is. He doesn't get any older, doesn't get any younger. He just exists outside of time and space. That's why the author of Hebrews can say in Hebrews 13:8, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so, by extension, we can say the same things about God. God is not experienced that same passage of time as we do. He is not limited by time and space. But there's kind of a problem here if God's non physical. What about all those biblical passages that talk about God's hands, God's mouth, God's eyes, God's ears, all those different things that we might hear? So if God's not physical, why does the body or why does the Bible often speak of God in terms of him having a different body parts? Seems kind of weird if God is non-physical. Well, what's going on here in the Bible is that we have anthropomorphic language. It's speaking anthropological. So, just to remind you, if you have forgotten your English classes, anthropomorphic language is when you apply human traits to a non human object. So, for example, somebody might speak of trees clapping their hands when the wind's blowing through the trees, just a poetic way, a metaphorical way to describe what's going on with the noise. In the same way, the Bible uses anthropomorphic language to describe God. It's not saying that he literally, in his essence and being, has a body, but it's using this to express an idea. So it's not saying that God literally has hands, mouth, body, ears, etc. He's not. It's not literally saying that. Instead, it's using a anthropomorphic term, a metaphorical language to get across an idea. So when it says that God is speaking out of his mouth, it's letting us know that God is revealing and saying things to us in his word. So he does not experience those same limitations that we have. The Bible often will describe God in anthropomorphic language, and he is a non-physical being. So being a non-physical being, then he's not limited to a particular location and to a lifespan. He's outside of space and time. So for us as physical beings, we can only be in one place at one time, but God can be present everywhere at all times. begins to blow your mind when you begin to think about what all it entails for God to be spirit. God is not limited. He is not growing old, and he is not limited to one location. So the second part, so number one, God is non-physical. The second part is kind of related, is God is invisible. God is invisible to the human sight. He's unseen. This reason is why we can depict God or why God in the second commandment says, please make no graven images. Or actually, it's not please, it's do not make any graven images. Well, why the concern about graven images? Well, anything physical being used to describe and explain what God is like, so any kind of physical component there is an insult to God because he is spirit. It does not represent him in his fullness because it's all of a sudden trying to take a spiritual being that without limits and put limits on a spiritual being. So it's an insult to who God is. So this reason is also why we cannot see God physically. So he is spiritual and invisible to our eyes. So the atheist sometimes will demand to, hey, if I just saw God, I would believe in him. It's really an impossible request. So in fact, the Bible even tells us in Exodus 33:20 that no man may see my face and live. Later on in the Old Testament, Isaiah has a personal experience with God and his glory, and he remarks that he is undone, that he is unraveled. You can find that in Isaiah 6. So if the atheist, or anyone else for that matter, wants to see God, he or she would die. That's what the biblical teaching is about seeing this invisible God. If we were ever to actually see him, we would die. So it's actually for a benefit that we cannot see God, because otherwise we would be undone and unravel at the seams. And so God is invisible. He's not to be depicted by anything in the world. Instead, he is to we are to worship him as spirit. The third thing, kind of an implication of that, so if God is non-physical, God is invisible, he does not have physical limitations. One of the implications is that God is present everywhere because he is spirit. So that term is called omnipresent, meaning that God is present everywhere. So there's no escaping the presence of this spiritual being, our God. There's no escaping his presence. So when you begin to think about all that entails, it means that God is present here. God is present wherever it may be around the globe, and he's also present everywhere in the universe. It begins to get a bit mind-blowing to think about the presence of God. The psalmist would actually reflect upon the nature of God being present everywhere, and basically say, no matter where I go, you're there. There's no escaping God's presence. There's two ways that you can kind of imagine or kind of experience the presence of God, or how it affects you personally. The first one is a great comfort, and the second one could be a great curse. The comfort is God's presence is promised and comforting for the believer. So when I experience difficulty and I need courage, or when I'm going through a trial or trouble, I know that God is there going through it with me. I am not alone in my difficulties, in my trials, when I need courage. So I don't have to go at it alone. I can know that God is with me, and he knows and is involved with what is going on. But it could also prove a curse if you are not following Jesus and not following God, because God is present. So there's nothing done in secret before God. There's sort of this foolish idea that, nobody else sees this, so, I can go ahead and get away with it, and it's not really all that bad because nobody else sees it. But God is in the darkest recesses of your mind and of your life. There is no such thing as privacy before God. There is nothing done where God is not present. So, which is why God can hold everyone everywhere accountable before him. There's no escaping this omnipresent God. So, two kind of ways that when you begin to think that God is present everywhere, that you could begin to reflect upon that is, one is it could be a great comfort to you because you know that you are in Christ, you are in God. So you know that since you are now a part of God's family, you can actually have a positive experience with that. God being present everywhere, because you know that he is going to take care of you no matter what is going on, because he is there with you. However, if you're not following Jesus, if you're not in God's family, you're going to find this idea of God being all present as a curse. Why? Because we all know that we have made mistakes. We'd like to think that we have private lives that nobody else sees, and that maybe we can get away with some stuff. but we know that God is there and sees all. So it all depends on what your relationship to God is like. Is it one of a familiar relationship, like God is our Father, or is it one of a as God going to be coming down on us as a judge because we are not found in Him? So God is spirit. God is present everywhere. He's invisible. He is a non-physical being, and we get to encounter and experience this God if we are in Him and get to have that knowledge of His presence everywhere in our lives because of His spiritual essence. So I hope that this has been an encouragement to you, especially now that we are practicing things like social distancing, and perhaps maybe you're feeling lonely right now. But you can know that God is there going with you through this trial as a believer, and know that God is there to comfort and encourage you during these times. So, as always, if you have any comments or questions, please comment below. I hope that you guys have been enjoying these videos and they've been helping to encourage you to learn more about the God who is there.